yes, people have said to me, you make fun of the left more than you used to. And guilty, I have, because the left has changed. Now, the right has changed also, and even worse. To me, you're presenting more of a false equivalency on this issue than I would. The Republican
Party is unrecognizable from what it
especially
was.
the Congress people.
Right.
They're just there to do performative nonsense.
Is
and
it
also,
a prime
and just
example?
people like Marjorie Taylor Greene, and just real mental midgets.
Comedian and political commentator Bill Maher has been breaking the hearts of MAGA Republicans, regular Republicans, and enlightened centrists by saying that whatever issues he may have with the left, the right is objectively worse. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bell before you go. All right, friends, we have several clips to look at in this video. Bill Maher has recently been on something of a media tour because he's selling a book of his New Rule monologues, which are a staple of Real Time with Bill Maher. And it invites multiple opportunities for Maher to expound on controversies and controversial statements that he's made. And he is something of a darling for right-wing enlightened centrists or right-wingers in general because he constantly criticizes the left. And it gets on my nerves, full disclosure, as I've mentioned in previous videos, how much Maher hyper-fixates on these niche culture war issues. But one thing I like about Maher, and one thing that I really enjoy about him, is that he's willing to say this to right-wingers, is that whatever issues he may have with the left, the right is objectively worse. So we're going to play some clips and unpack it together.
I haven't turned. Yes, people have said to me, you make fun of the left more than you used to. And guilty, I have, because the left has changed. Now, the right has changed also, and even worse. I mean, the right doesn't believe in democracy anymore. I mean, they've thrown their lot in with this sociopath named Donald Trump, who only thinks elections count when we win. Okay.
I mean, again, I think this is so important to hear. It's going to be a recurring staple of the interviews that we're going to be pulling from. But enlightened centrists tend to create false equivalences, and that they'll say that, okay, yeah, Donald Trump is an authoritarian or he's a fascist. But again, the left, they want to change the shoes on the green M&M from heels to sneakers. And isn't that just as bad? No, it's not. And if you think it is, you're just simply wrong. You're deluded. And Bill Maher, as much as I think he disproportionately weighs the culture war issues, he still recognizes that the Republican Party in its current iteration is much worse than the Democratic Party on its very worst day.
It does seem like many folks, I don't know if it's many, but certainly the loudest folks who get into Congress run on not necessarily to make deals and to actually get stuff done. It's to own the libs or own the Trumpians, and it's not necessarily about, any kind of moderation is a nasty word. Any kind of making an actual deal.
I mean, to me, you're presenting more of a false equivalency on this issue than I would. The Democrats in Congress, I certainly don't agree with all of them, and there are some that are way out there. I won't say any names, the squad, that, I don't agree with on a lot of stuff. But they're generally still a sane party of our type of government, our parliament, if you will. The Republican
Party is unrecognizable from what it
especially
was.
The Congress people.
Right.
They're just there to do performative nonsense. They're there to, burnish their credentials to get a show on Fox News or something.
The border deal
example. People like Marjorie Taylor Greene, and just real mental midgets they are not interested in legislation. They don't know how it works. They're not really interested in improving the country. They are just interested, as you said, in owning the libs, making.
Precisely. And again, I think this is so important because, again, Maher curries quite a bit of favor and respect with right-wingers. I would argue it's selective. But if to the extent that he can reach anybody on the right or anybody in the center who is genuinely confused about which of the two parties are better, which of the two parties are worse, I think they need to hear this, that as much as Maher will, again, just shine a spotlight on the most ridiculous culture war issue, which affects 3 people, why are you even talking about it? Even he recognizes that, he takes issue with the squad. Now, I think the squad, for the most part, has been a force for good in this country. I mean, Ron Klain, President Biden's former chief of staff, made it abundantly clear that as a general proposition, and he said this in an interview, that the squad, people like AOC and Ilhan Omar, were much more dependable for enacting the president's agenda and much less recalcitrant and much less oppositional compared to centrists in the Senate like Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin. So I think he's giving them a bad rap. But again, he roasts Marjorie Taylor Greene there. He's like, listen, there's no equivalence there. Democrats on their very worst day in Congress are better than the Republicans at their very best. And I think that's a distinction worth making.
Really? Can you believe that this is it seems like it's going to be the only trial that will go before the election?
Well, I've been moaning and railing about that on my show because I tore Merrick Garland a new one a couple of weeks ago because I think the Democrats blew it, as they always do with this kind of stuff, because they've had 4 years. What was all the delay about? Why are we coming to the end? Of course they're going to try to run out the clock.
Yeah, this is, again, a complaint that Bill Maher has, which I think is perfectly deserved, directed at President Biden's Attorney General, Merrick Garland. I've talked about this. Merrick Garland seems like a well-intentioned man. He seems like a competent man, but he has a judicial temperament, right? He was a judge. He was a prosecutor for years. Then he became a federal judge. And then he was President Obama's nominee to replace the conservative Supreme Court Justice Antonin Scalia after Scalia died. As you know, Mitch McConnell, the Republican majority leader, refused to even hold a hearing for Garland because he said it was an election year and we just can't allow presidents in election year to shape the courts. And then, of course, McConnell broke his own rule 4 years later in 2020, also an election year, by allowing Donald Trump to replace liberal Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, once again showing that Republicans are unprincipled losers and hypocrites. But I think Maher is absolutely correct that Merrick Garland was just too feckless. Merrick Garland, we have credible reporting that indicated that Garland was much too concerned with the perceptions of bias. He didn't want to piss off MAGA world even more, so he dragged his feet with respect to prosecuting Trump. Then he ultimately chose to do it anyway, which was the right call, but he should have done it sooner. And as a result from all this, there will probably be no trial for any of the federal cases against Trump from special counsel Jack Smith. And this is the kicker. For all of Garland's efforts to try to curry favor and win people back over on the right who thought that the Department of Justice was weaponized, none of them have returned. None of them think that Merrick Garland's efforts to try to avoid prosecuting Trump matter at all. So he has failed spectacularly on every front. With that in mind, I want to play a couple more clips from a more recent interview with Fareed Zakaria.
About how the left has gone crazy. But to be fair to you, you've always also pointed out the right has gone even crazier, embracing Trump. I want to ask you why you think it happened. Because, this was the party of Ronald Reagan. Free markets, free trade, loved immigration, very optimistic. What do you think made it, it's now dour, pessimistic. America is it's American carnage.
Well, I think the basis of it is we started to hate each other. I mean, you mentioned Ronald Reagan. Famously, he used to have a drink at the end of the day, often with Tip O'Neill, who was the leader in the House and the Democrat. But they were just two Irish Pauls.
So this is where Maher, I think, he romanticizes too much of the past. So President Reagan and Speaker O'Neill, yes, they were fierce adversaries with respect to legislation, but they were also able to work together in good faith. The problem is what happened after Reagan and O'Neill left office. So you look at the presidency of Bill Clinton, and the real culprit of this is Newt Gingrich. Newt Gingrich was the Republican Speaker of the House at the time, and he was basically the progenitor of the McConnell playbook. McConnell took Gingrich's partisan obstructive formula and ran with it, but Gingrich was the one who ran on trying to thwart President Clinton at every turn. I mean, just some really ridiculous stuff, plus a special counsel investigation by Ken Starr trying to impeach President Clinton as well. Newt Gingrich was the one who radically shaped this. So again, it falls on the Republicans' responsibility. And then, of course, McConnell ran with it. And speaking of McConnell, Fareed Zakaria mentions to Bill Maher, after Bill Maher says that, about, hey, having drinks and trying to get along with the opposition. Well, Democrats tried that and it didn't work. So it sounds like, again, it's not the Democrats' fault, it's the Republicans.
So what should, somebody like Obama came in trying to be the unifier.
Right.
I remember he famously would invite the then Speaker, John Boehner, to White House screenings.
Right.
Boehner went to a couple, got so much shit for it, never went back. Biden has tried, to reach out. What's the strategy that might work?
Apparently not that. I mean, I think we're past that. I don't know what it is. I mean, I think this goes back to the Supreme Court fights that we had like in the, was it late 80s or early 90s? This goes back a long way. So it's going to take a long way to get back to some sort of normalcy. I don't know. Sometimes you have to hit bottom before you can go back to the top.
I don't know what that would look like, but this again is where I disagree with Bill Maher. I mean, certainly it's been a matter of time. It didn't happen overnight. But again, I think that the real culprit here was the Gingrich speakership, the Republican Party as it was led by Newt Gingrich, and then Mitch McConnell ran with it. Mitch McConnell famously said after President Obama was elected that they're going to make Obama a one-term president. He said some very similar things about President Biden as well. Now, Biden has had more success than Obama in terms of bipartisan appeal and bipartisan cooperation, but not much. I mean, Republicans, like right now, Republicans are in the control of the House of Representatives. They're in the majority, and it's the least productive iteration of Congress since the Great Depression, on track to be the least productive iteration of Congress since the Civil War. And Democrats, when they're in divided government, like when Donald Trump was president and Nancy Pelosi, Democrat, was Speaker of the House, it wasn't this incompetent. Even then, Pelosi got more done, and even got more done bipartisanly than Republicans in the House of Representatives have under Biden. This is a uniquely Republican phenomenon. They're incapable of governing. They're incapable of bipartisanship in good faith because their base and their politics punish it. It disincentivizes bipartisan cooperation, even on common sense issues, because it would be seen as giving the opposition a political victory. Right? Again, this is, as far as I'm concerned, this is a problem that is pretty much exclusively the fault of the Republican Party. But the bottom line is that overall, even Bill Maher, somebody who leans entirely too much into centrist right-wing culture war tropes, I think he's too generous with the benefit of the doubt. Even he recognizes, again, on their very worst day, the Democratic Party is better than the Republican Party at its very best. And I think it's important that he continues to publicly air that fact, because hopefully the MAGA cultists, the Republicans, the right-wing centrists and independents watching Maher will take those words to heart. Let me know what you think in the comments.